But first, all day I've heard that the Hawthorn Football Club has a racism crisis. And this story has already spread as far as Britain, because once you're accused of racism, of course, you're as good as guilty already. Just ask Eddie Maguire. But I've seen these media moral pack attacks before, and I say, wait. Before I join this one, there are some things I still want to know. Because so far we've heard just one side of the story. Now, as it happens, I actually agree with the AFL's decision to investigate the claims that Hawthorn separated some of its Indigenous players from their families and even told one player to get his girlfriend to have an abortion. Now, these claims, if true, if without good justification, suggest to me there is a harshness at that club and a disgusting contempt for the life of an unborn child. One former player claims he was left suicidal. So yes, do investigate this.
We need to do more, and we will. We need greater safety and education across our game. There are so many people who are hurting today and have been hurting for a long time. And to all of them, I want to acknowledge that hurt. And so that as a game, we will do everything to ensure that the hurt you experienced is not a hurt that is experienced by others. We need to run a proper investigation to get to the bottom of it, and this is important.
But let's first get a few things straight. Starting with this, no one is actually forced to become an AFL footballer. It is a choice. Now, it's not a choice that most people would make, because you don't get all that money and fame for nothing, not when you're competing against some of the hungriest, fittest and most ruthless young men in the country. You're going to have to make sacrifices, and sometimes very big ones. And so we get teenage recruits, some homesick, getting drafted to clubs on the other side of the country. You get some players asked to play through enormous pain. Some are warned off bad friends. Really, anything that's in the way of giving 100% has got to go. Now, that does not mean that a club should treat players like dirt or like clay that they can somehow mould into any shape that suits the club. Because often it's better for the club to work with the player they've got. Encourage them, not break them. So what allegedly happened at Hawthorn? Now, all that we do know is what the ABC has reported, and we know the ABC does have a strong race agenda. The ABC has spoken to families of players referred to in an independent report. Actually, that report's by First Nations consultants, so-called, and there's perhaps another agenda there. And this report was commissioned by Hawthorn on the treatment of its Aboriginal players, and the AFL so far refuses to release it. Now, the ABC quotes 3 unidentified players at length from the more than 20 Indigenous players who were with Hawthorn when it was coached by Alistair Clarkson, a premiership-winning coach. In fact, he's hailed as the best coach of modern times. Now, we do not know how typical these complaints are. We do not know if the alleged treatment of these players was any worse than the treatment of non-Aboriginal players either. So again, wait before shouting racist. But these players and their families accuse Clarkson and his then football operations manager Chris Fagan and development manager Jason Burt of being cruel, and not just by moving them out of their homes. These players said they also had their phone numbers changed to cut off their ties to their families and their girlfriends. And two was told, they said, to break off with their girlfriends. One says he was even told to get his girlfriend to have an abortion. Clarkson, Fagan, Burt, none of them were actually interviewed for this report. None of them even got to see it. So again, big questions about fairness here. They've all now refused to tell the ABC their side of the story, although Clarkson has just issued a statement saying player welfare was in fact always his top priority. These claims shocked him, and he said, I was not afforded any due process, he's got that bit right, and I refute, or reject actually, any allegation of wrongdoing or misconduct. Any allegation of wrongdoing. He's not commenting further. But even the ABC has suggested what he and the others would say, or some of it, if they could. And that is, they told their players that their family contacts and their old social circles were holding them back, and that to succeed in the AFL, they needed a clean break. Now, to repeat, This was a player's choice, and even Aboriginal players can make choices and say no. Then there were other details making me wonder what else Clarkson, Fagan and Burt might say in their defence. For instance, I read that the woman that Hawthorn allegedly wanted to have an abortion refused to, and good on her. The boyfriend that Hawthorn allegedly told to leave her went back to her, and they had the baby. Now true, 6 months after that there was an abortion, but it was not one that the club asked for, yet it's now blamed for. Another warning bell for me. One girlfriend said she was affronted when Clarkson insisted on visiting one night and offering commentary on the house's cleanliness. And she thought the club was very wrong to regard her father as a threat to her boyfriend, a Hawthorn player. Okay. But yes, Clarkson and his team seem, from this one-sided account, to be perhaps even brutal in their pursuit of success. But we have to remember it was also success that gave many other players their highest highs. And for some players, the sacrifices paid off. So I'd like to hear Clarkson, Fagan and Burt give their side before I join the pack that's now dancing on their heads and accusing them of racism. And then with this racism, what racism exactly? What is it? Just offending a player because it's Aboriginal does not mean you've been racist. Could be many other reasons you've offended them. Well, you might argue here that Hawthorn should have made a special allowance for Aboriginal players because of their allegedly deeper bonds with family, or perhaps greater need of support. That's possible. Yet is it actually racist to fail to give special treatment because of race? Not sure about that. But you know how it is when race is dragged in and fingers get pointed, someone's got to be a scapegoat. And already Fagan has taken leave of absence as coach of Brisbane to focus on defending himself. Now Fagan standing down, of course, makes him already seem guilty. But his club had to cut some ties with him to protect itself. And as Fagan would know, AFL clubs can demand painful sacrifices to succeed. Now, like I say, let's wait to hear both sides of that story before damning Hawthorn as racist. But again, when did our media ever wait for that? Who dares wait? Because if you wait, you might be called a racist too. And so we get a whole industry of complaints, don't we? Some absolutely absurd or trivial, I'm not including the Hawthorn ones in that, with almost no one daring to push back.